Hey, welcome back, welcome back, Vault 64 Bolt here. Today I'm bringing you a full tutorial on how to motion track Minecraft and fluid simulations. So, first of all, we'll just start by creating a new world. There will be multiple things you need to download for this. You need Blender to allow you to actually add in the fluid simulations, and you will need Fabric to load the mod to track the game, and you need to use the mod itself, which is the replay mod. Okay, so first of all, what you're probably going to do is do /tp 0 tilde, I think it's called, the squiggly line, then 0. Then this, what you want to do is just place some sort of block here. Generally I go for a gold block, and that's so we know where 0, 0 is. Then if you press F3 and look up here, you want to face north east. So you want to build in this general area, and you want to be as close to 0, 0 as you can, just so that when you import the camera into Blender, which is the program where you do all the fluid simulations, it is close to the center. Otherwise it's very far off in the distance and you cannot easily move it. However, I have recently worked out a way you can kind of move it, but if you do it not properly it can cause some issues. So now we're here, what I'm going to do is just build up a little box for it to interact with. So basically a lot of people have asked how to do this, and I felt as though my old tutorial was a little bit outdated and there was not much information in it. So I'm recording this one, making this one to help those that did not understand completely in my original video. Okay, so now we have this. So at this point, what you probably want to do is start planning how your actual video is going to go. So what I'm just going to do is just place water down there, like that, and then just have it flow out. But one thing I will say is if you're going to place water, and you actually want to have this move like that to place the water, and you are not able to use a program like After Effects to add that in, then you will need to use command blocks. You could left click as well, like that, if you're in survival, for it to work. Well, actually first let me show you what mods you need and how to install the mods. Okay, so the two of the things you'll need to download to actually record the Minecraft movement is you need to download Fabric. So if you just look up Fabric online on Minecraft, then go to open their website and just click download. Then you just download the installer and then open it up, and then just follow the installation instructions, which is all this here. And then you also need the replay mod, which I'm using replay mod 1.17, and I do not recommend using Optifine, because to use Optifine with Fabric you'll need to use a mod called OptiFabric, which does not work well. What I do recommend is using Sodium and Iris. However, you do not need that unless you need shaders. So you would just download it from here and then download Iris shaders. Okay, so then if you navigate to your Minecraft file and then mods, then you just want to drop in Fabric API, Iris if you're using it, and then replay mod. That's all you need. Ignore all the other mods I have. Okay, then once you have the mods installed, start up Minecraft. Okay, so just a few things which I'll add, which this will be edited into the start of the video rather than the end, hopefully. If you go into options and then accessibility options, settings, change your FOV effects down to 0, because then if you sprint like we are now, you see how my actual field of view doesn't change. And if I take a bow, you see how it doesn't zoom in. This is Optifine zoom, but you see how it doesn't zoom in when I use the bow. This is useful because if your field of view changes, you would then have to keyframe your FOV. Why is that set to 100? It should be 90. You will then have to keyframe your FOV in Blender. So just keep that in mind. You can obviously have this at 100, so you can change when you sprint or when you use a bow, but you will have to keyframe it in Blender. If you go over here and then you click settings, set it to record single player, record server, but turn off automatic recording. What this allows you to do is when you load up the world, it doesn't start recording, but if you press escape, you are able to start recording by yourself. So get out your bucket or whatever you want to use. I'm going to go into survival mode, and now I'm going to record. So I'm going to walk up, open doors, and then just left click. And over here, left click. And then you need to try and remember, like work out where the fluid's going to go. So currently there'll be water on the floor. So let me just left click again, left click again. That's now 4 fluid sources I have to add in. So keep that in mind. And now I'm just going to run around because I'm going to add collision to the camera. And you'll be able to see the water moving. Now, I've opened the doors. It's all just blown out. And that's it. Just a short sign. It's just a short one like that. Okay. Then when you exit out of the world, this will open in the top right. And what you can do is you can just rename this. So I'm going to rename this how to motion wrap MC2. And then just click done. And then on your main menu, if you click this button here, it takes you to your replay viewer. Then you just click there and click load. Okay, now this may seem quite complicated at first, but when you load it in, just press P and that will pause it. So if you press T, you can then get the mouse and just click right at the start, 0, 0, and wait for it to load. Once you've done that, you want to fly over to the player and then left click on them, and you'll see this button here up here goes blue. So you want to add in a spectator keyframe and then add in a time keyframe. Okay, and then now that tells it that you want to spectate the player, so move where the player moves, and you want that time to start at that time. And if you click at the very end of here, that should take you to the correct time on this timeline as well, as long as this is set to speed 1. Then you just add in a time keyframe, you spectate the player, and add in a spectator keyframe. And now, remember, press T to be able to move the mouse. And now if you look at the path, this is the path that we moved as a player. Okay, now what you want to do is if you want to be able to see what the player is holding, then you can skip this step and go to the time on screen. However, if you do not want to be able to see what the player is holding in their hand, press B and then just uncheck this little button here so that it does not show the player. I am going to be showing the player because I want to be able to see what is in their hand, because I want to see when they left click to place the water bucket. Okay, so now what you want to do is go up here to render camera path, click on it, and you want to make sure this is set to default rendering, and you want to make sure this is set to open EXR. Now this is where it gets complicated. If you are able to render in cycles, which in Blender is a like ray tracing kind of rendering engine, so if you had like shaders on Minecraft or Bedrock RTX, then you are able to use any of these other ones, which will reduce the file size for the image. However, if you want to render it out in eevee, which is kind of like what Minecraft uses and has that kind of feel to it, then you need to use an OpenEXR sequence. Okay, after this, make sure you can set your bitrate higher if you want, but make sure that your video frame rate is set to something like 30 frames or 24 frames per second. I'm going to set mine to 30. Then what you want to do is come down here and check depth map, depth, map and export camera path. These are the two most important settings. Okay, then what you can do is click here where it says output file, and this name down here, you can then just click there, do Control-A and then rename it. It will probably just be a random letters, or numbers I mean, which will be date, time, how many you recorded that day on that world and stuff like that. But for me, I've already renamed it. So then just click save. And now what you want to do is just, no, you don't want anti-aliasing. You can use shaders for that. However, we're not going to use shaders as that makes this more complicated. And now, as long as your settings are somewhat like this, make sure to set your video resolution to the correct one, which I believe is 1920 by 1080p. And that should be standard screen resolution, 16:9 aspect ratio. Okay, so once you've got all this, just click render and then wait for that to render out. I'll see you when this is done. One thing I will quickly say whilst this is rendering out is if you click here, just to make sure that it's rendering out as you want it to and everything looks okay, and then just make sure to hide it afterwards so that it goes fast enough. Whilst this is rendering out, I would just like to say please leave a like and subscribe, as far as I am aware, I am the only person on YouTube who has made a tutorial on how to do this, and I would really appreciate it if you helped this video to get into the algorithm so that others know how to make videos like these as well. Okay, so once replay mod finishes exporting or rendering the video, then it just puts you back here. What you can do now is just exit the replay because we're now done in Minecraft. Okay, so now what you need to do is you need to download Blender just by going to blender.org. Go to download, then I recommend the long-term support version 2.93.4. So yeah, just download that, install it, just follow the instructions, there we go, to install it, and it should be okay. So, because Blender allows you to do all these awesome sorts of stuff, including fluid simulations. Okay, so once you've installed Blender, load it up and you'll be presented with this scene. Now some people probably don't know how to use this, so I will tell you everything. I'll just give you a basic tutorial. So using a mouse, middle mouse button, hold it down and then move your mouse to move the camera. Hold down shift and use the middle mouse button to pan the camera. Left click to select, right click to bring up options. And that's the basic shortcuts you need to know for this tutorial. I'll tell you everything else I do. So start this off by pressing A and then pressing X and then left click. And that's now just deleted the scene and cleared it up. So then what you want to do is just press Control S. Okay, then what you can do is I just press Window toggle window full screen. If you click Edit, go down to Preferences and then click Add-ons. What you want to enable is Node Wrangler. Now, probably don't know what this is at the moment, but just make sure that this is enabled. Okay, so now what you want to do is click over here and just make sure to set this frame rate to what you exported in replay mod. I set mine to 30, which is the standard, so I'm going to set this to 30 frames per second. Then what you want to do is go up here, click File, Import GLTF 2.0. This is the camera system. So now if you navigate to the folder where you exported your image sequence, and you'll have a file called camera.glb. Just either double click or left click once and click import. Now if you press 0 on the number pad, it will take you over to the camera, and if you press spacebar, it will move the camera about. Okay, so generally I find that the first 30 frames can be a little bit weird. However, in this case, it works from frame 20. So I'm just going to left click down here and insert 20. Now we're going to go to our final frame by what you want to do is just, so left click this bit here, bring up, use your middle mouse button to just drag this around, and then scroll wheel to zoom out. Make sure to, if you can't see these dots, just make sure you've selected the camera up here and in here, so you have the orange border, and make sure, so just middle click and then drag down just to make sure that you can see them. Okay, so the end file is up here about 1286. If you just left click up here where the numbers are, it will move the timeline thing to there. So just left click there and type in that number, 1286. So now if you hold down shift and press the left arrow, it takes you to the beginning of the frames. So now what you can just do is scroll out, just move it along so that you have them all just shown there. Okay, so now if you press space, you will see the camera moves about in the way that it would in the video itself. So shift left click to move it to the start. So up here, if you click compositing, then use nodes. And then if you go over here to options, so on this little bar here, and just check open CL. Now you can press N just to hide that bit on the side. So in here it's middle mouse click to move the camera around, left click to move these around, and that's it. If your lines aren't like curved like this and they're just straight, don't worry, I just have that set up in preferences. I will show you how to do that in another video if you need to. So if you press Shift A and then hover over input, you will see image sequence. If you do not see this, then you need to go to edit, preferences, add-ons, and then node wrangler. So click that, select image sequence, then navigate to the folder and then scroll down to 0.exr and just import image sequence. Okay, now if you look here, you see how it's like faded kind of image. So go down here to where it says linear, left click and select sRGB, and that will sort out the image. Now what you want to do is set the start frame to 0 by just left clicking and then setting it to that number, then offset to -2. And what this does is this matches this up with how the camera moves, so that it actually looks how the camera moves. So what you want to do is set this frames to what you have down here for the end, -1, so 1285, like that. So just left click and press enter. Okay, so now if you press Shift A and then search up Z combine, and then you have this node, which is what allows us to actually overlay the fluid simulation, which I'll get to later, onto the image. So now if you left click on this little yellow dot next to where it says image, just drag that to where it says image down here, drag depth to Z, then from down here you drag image to image and depth to Z. You just redo that. There we go. Now if you hold down control and right click, that just cuts that line there, and you can take, and you can then add in an alpha over and take that image to there, select use alpha and take that over to there. Yeah, you need that image in the bottom of that, then drag this down to that there. So all in all, it should look like this when you're done. Okay, so now if we hop back over to layout, if you're in the camera mode, you can either press 0 on the number pad, or you can just press the middle mouse button to be able to move the camera around once again. Now what we need to do is import the actual world itself. So for that we're going to use a program called mineways. Okay, so if you just look up mineways on Google Chrome, then it will be a link like this. Then you just click download. I'm not going to click this because it will download it to my computer and I've already downloaded it. And or you can just download this one, which is smaller files. But yeah, this allows you to import it into Blender here. So once you've downloaded it, just follow the instructions which are on here. So this one, or wherever it is. Yeah, this one here. And then once you've installed that, come back to the video. Okay, so once you have mineways open, I've just set it to full screen. Just go to File, Open, navigate to your Minecraft saves folder, open up the world and then level.dat, and then zoom in, and then just click View, Jump to Player, and then you'll be able to see the outline of the area where you recorded this. Now, because we placed the gold block down at 0, 0, we can see it just of here. These are our coordinates down in the bottom left here. So if you hold down right click on this block at 0, 0, then just go here and then just drag it. So hold it down and drag to select the train. And then just click yes. And up here, drag this slider down to 0. So we need to start at 0, 0 so that when we import this into Blender, we know exactly where to put it for it to line up with the camera. And then we need to take this down to 0 so that we know what height to put it at. Okay, so once you've done this, click File, and then click Export for rendering. Once you've navigated to the folder and named it, ignore the fact that I already have one here. I accidentally messed up and forgot to record. Just click Save. Then we don't need to change any of these settings, so just click OK and yes. Okay, so hop back into Blender. So then what you want to do is click File. Once you're back in Blender, click File, Import OBJ or Wavefront. And then navigate to the correct file and click on the world.obj or whatever you named it, .obj. And just click Import. And now we've imported the world. So when you first import this, it won't line up with the camera, and that is because it is centered. This is why we have placed down a gold block or any other block at 0, 0, so we know where to center it or where to start off the export from. So now if you go up here, you see these 4 little circles. Click this one, which will then put it into viewport shading, and we can see the Minecraft train, although it does look a little bit blurry, but we will fix that in a minute. Then if you click this Z, it will take you into top view, and then just click on the terrain, make sure it's selected with the orange border or this up here, and then press G, then hold down Control and move it until the corner lines up with this very center intersection here. Now if we press 0 on the number pad and then press space, our camera now lines up with the camera with the world. Okay, so now we are going to sort out the fact that this terrain is blurry. So if you go up to scripting, click new, and then copy and paste this code from the description, and then just press Ctrl S to save the file. If it pops up with a file, just save it, and this is your blend file. But it also saves this as well, and then just click this little button here. And now if we go back over to layout, all of these blocks are now no longer blurry. This does not matter so much for if you are rendering how I'm going to show you how to do it. However, this does matter if you are rendering the world itself. Another thing I will say is if you just press dot on the number pad, it just puts the entire object you've selected into view. But another thing I will say is the reason this works is because over here on these files, so if you click over here, so shading tab, click over here, and then you can see all the materials, which is what's on each one of these blocks. This image file, the interpolation was set to linear. So if we now look at stone, what you can see it's doing is it is trying to take all the pixels on the stone, which there are only 16 pixels of because it's Minecraft, and it's saying this point here, what color are the surrounding pixels, and then it gets a mixture of those colors, but we don't want that, so we said it's closest. So now this pixel here, or actually if I click X and then zoom in, this pixel here is saying what is the closest color pixel to me on the image, and it sees this one, and so it shows that color. But if we set that back to linear, you see how it's all like kind of the same blurry color. So that's what this code does. It sets all these to closest. Another thing I will mention is plants like this grass will have this black border on them. To fix that, scroll through till you get to that object. Select this file. If you left click and then press G to drag it about, and then take the alpha and plug that into the alpha down here. And now if we scroll down here and set the blend mode to alpha clip, it is now see-through. So middle mouse button to move this around, and then scroll wheel to zoom in and out. Okay, so now if you go back over to layout up here, what we're going to do is we're going to do the fluid simulation. So to do that, go up here and just hide the object. I'm going to rename this to terrain. You can do that. Ignore my bad spelling, please. There we go, better spelling. You can do that by just double left click. So now if you press 0 on the number pad, and then select the camera by either clicking this border or just clicking camera up here, go down to this green button here that says camera, check the box for background images, click the little arrow, click add image, and then over here, so if you go to here, then just left click this little button here and select hashtag.exr. Then just set the frames to this -1, so 1285 in my case. Start to 0 and then offset to -2. Make sure color space is set to sRGB. So now if you press shift left arrow, then you press space, although it will be quite laggy, the movements of the camera should now match up with this image. To see if that's working, just show the terrain and you'll be able to see. Now if we just set this to wireframe mode, we can see if it matches up. Now we can see that this doesn't quite match up. So now we can just go back to viewport shading. So now what we can do is we can hide the terrain, press 0 on the number pad, then go over to scripting. What you actually want, click this little button here, click this little button here to create a new text file, then just left click on this border and left click on this border. And then if you press 0 on the number pad here, and then you go here, click this button and set it to timeline, and then set this to timeline, and you just click the arrow next to summary, just drag that out of the way. So now what you want to do is just drag this along until you see when you place the water bucket, then just use the left and right arrow keys to wait until the bucket starts to move. So in this case, frame 202. So let's just put first bucket, then 202. So we know what frame we need to start the fluid simulation at. Then just do that for all the other times you place down water. So just drag the button and then use the arrow keys, left and right, to move the thing. So here it's 3/52. So second bucket is 3:57. Okay, so once you've got all the frames where you place down a bucket of water or did some other action that you need to note. So for example, I know at the end we open the doors, so I'm going to note down the frame when we opened the doors by going to about where we opened it, and then setting it to, then using the arrow keys to note down exactly when the doors opened. And I'll do it from when both doors are closed to when they're open, which will be 11:63. So doors open 11:63. Now, if there's a massive difference, so more than these 5 frames between when the doors opened, between when one door opened and the other, I would note down the doors individually. However, as I know that these 5 frames will not make too much of a difference, I am just going to leave them as they are. Okay, so now what we need to do is actually first, so now what we're going to do first is just sort out these doors. So if we go to scripting, doors open at 11:63, so 11, go to frame 11:63, and now left click the terrain and press tab. So now if you go up here and you see these 3 little boxes, one of them is vertex selection, so we can select the individual points of the structure, and then you can press G to be able to move them around. And then if you press right click, it cancels the movement. If you did accidentally left click, just press Ctrl Z to undo, or Ctrl Shift Z to redo. Then this one is edge selection mode, so this allows us to move an entire edge. Then this is face selection mode, which allows us to select an entire face of an object. Now, as you see, when I move this, it moves these surrounding edges here as well. That's because if we go into vertex mode, you see how all these are connected. However, if you notice, when I moved this one, the door itself did not move. That is because this door is a separate object. So if you left click on the door and press L, and then L over that one, and then we'll also do this one over here, so press L and L. So what you want to do first is, so left click on the door normal, then hover over the door, press L, press L, press L, and then press L, so that you've got just the door selected. So now if you press P and then separate by selection, now we have 2 separate objects. We have the doors and the terrain. Now these doors, if we go to object and then set origin to geometry, now when we move this about, it makes a little bit more sense where it is we move it to. This dot here is where it thinks the center of the object is. So frame 11:63 is when the doors are open, and as this is the open state of doors, we want these doors to be here when we're on frame 11:63. So what we're going to do is we're going to press I to insert a keyframe for a location. Then if you press left arrow, then you press G, and then you press Z, then you hold down Control and move the mouse down until the doors have disappeared into the ground. Then left click. You'll have a little bit of Z fighting here, which is because both these planes are on the same exact surface, so the computer doesn't know which one to show. Then you press I again and location. So now if you press right number but the right arrow and left arrow, you see how the doors just appear in the open state. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to add the closed door. So in this state we want the door to be closed, so we need an object to be here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these doors and press Shift D and then right click so that the door is in that position. Now if you come down here, make sure to select, so we'll rename these to doors quickly, so doors, then doors 2, so just double click to rename. So on doors 2, come down here to the timeline, press A, X, and then delete keyframes. So now if we go back a frame, then we hide this using this little button here, we can see that the other doors are down here, these doors are up here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is press Tab, L to select those doors, and then just X to delete vertices. So now we have one door by itself. So now if you press Z, go into wireframe mode, and then press R, Z, then it depends if you want to do 90 or minus 90. So if you just rotate it towards where you want it to go, and then look up here in the top left, and then just see if it's a negative or positive. For me, it's negative, so type in minus 90, then press enter. Now, if you look, this door is now facing the right way, but it's in the wrong position. So if you do object, set origin, origin to geometry, then click the little Z, then hold down G, and then if you look up here beforehand, you see how the Y is going this way. We want to move the door back this way, so let's go into wireframe mode, press G, then Y, then 0.5 for me, and now we have a door that is now lined up with the front of this wall. Now what we want to do is, as you can see, this door does not perfectly fill this gap, so we want to make this door larger. So to do that, we're going to press S. So to do that, we're going to press S. Now, as you can see, when I scale this up, you see how it gets wider this way as well. We don't want that to happen, so just press Ctrl Z if you did that. So if you press S and then hold down Shift, and then for me, it's press Y. And as you can see, when we scale this up, it now only scales along the X and Z axes, and it stays the same thickness as a door. So now if we go to frame 1162 for me, press I, insert a location keyframe, go to 1163, press G, Z, and then just hold down Control and move it down until you can no longer see it, then press I, location keyframe. So now the door is closed and the doors are now open, like that. Okay, so now we will work on the fluid simulation. So what we want to do is, first of all, we need to go back to the scripting tab, and we need to copy this frame, the first frame. So highlight it and then Control C, click here and then Control V, then press enter. You can also just manually type this in. So then what you can do is you click up here to cursor, you add in an object and select geometry for orientation, then just press 0 so you know where you're looking at. And I know I was looking at this block here, so we can just do that. Now I just noticed that this terrain does not actually line up with the camera, so by showing and hiding this, so I can see that this terrain is too far over to the right hand side. So select box. If you accidentally change it to something else, that's fine. Just left click and hold, and then set it back to select box. So I can see that this door is slightly too far over to the right. So what you want to do, is you want to left click on the train, press G and then Y, hold down Control and move it over until it is in the correct spot in the camera. Okay, so in doing that, we have also moved the doors by accident, or not moved the doors. So now these doors do not line up with the actual door itself. So the easiest way to fix that is by going to the frame, just pressing G, so selecting both doors by up here, hide the train, and then pressing G, Y, hold down Control, just move the door over, then press I for location, then go to the next frame, do the same, press G, Y, move it over, and then I, location. Now these doors should be in the correct spot. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add in the fluid simulation. So if you click the cursor here, so what you can do is up here, right click, new collection, and we'll rename this fluid. So up here, select cursor, select geometry under orientation, left click where you added the water bucket. If you don't know where that is, just go to train, hide and show, like this, then shift A, cube, and then scale down to, and then scale, shift A, cube, and then down here, set the size to 1. So So now what you want to do is, because it will not be perfectly lined up. Go away. Sorry, my cat's just now jumped up because I've not been giving her enough attention. I'll play with you in a minute. Go on, go sit over there. There you go. Okay, so now what you want to do is select this little orange square here. And make sure that all these numbers here, so our location on the x-axis, we want to be 8.5. Then on the y, we want to be 15.5. And now on the z, if we make that 77 or 76.5, so just round all the numbers to and then add a 0.5. This is now sat in the very corner, and it is the same size as one Minecraft block. And now if you press Shift S and either press number 1 or select cursor to world origin. That now moves the cursor, this thing here, back to the world origin. So just press dot to center on this cube. So dot on the number pad. Otherwise it opens up this box here if you do not use the number pad. Okay, so now if you go back to scripting, select the second number, then go to that frame, and now go back to layout, and then just Shift D, so select the cube, make sure it's orange, Shift D, hold down Control, and then move it over until it lines up like that. So now we can go over to the next tab, so 651, and now we move so now we press 0 to see what block we're looking at. If you don't know, do this and then make sure to hide the doors like as well. Then we're looking at this block here, so show the train, work out which block that is. So for me, I know it is this block here. So select a cube, Shift D, Control, and then G, Y, Control, that lines up, and then G, Z, Control. And then you can just double check these numbers, make sure they all end in 0.5, and make sure you're looking at the cube. So now we go to the final number, 699, 699. And we can see that we are looking at this block just up here on the wall. So we take the cube, Shift D, hold down Control. I do GY Control and GZ whilst holding down Control. And now we have our 4 cubes, which we're going to use for the fluid simulation. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add in a fluid domain, which is what actually simulates the fluid. So for this, we can just Shift D on any cube, rename it to domain, then just scale it up and make sure to press Shift Z until it fits the geometry you want to use. Then on the scale, you can just set it to 22. And then on the Z axis, go into wireframe mode and then just scale Z until it covers all the blocks you need it to. Then just make sure to set these to the regular numbers like that. Now if we go top viewport, so we go to here, we go to visibility, we go to viewport display as wire whilst we have the domain selected. So now we can see this shows up as a wireframe. For example, I can see this overhanging over the edge. So tab, select the face select mode, then just G, Y, Control. Now the reason it's Y is because if you look up here, we have X, which is left to right, Y, which is forwards to backwards, and then Z, which is up to down most of the time. And now we have our fluid domain, which is now covering the area. Okay, so now we've got our fluid domain. What we can do is over here, this little tab here, which is the physics properties. So make sure to select your domain, select fluid, select domain, select liquid, set this to a number like 196, 256, 128, something like that. Set the minimum to 2, You can set that to 8 or something if you want, but I like to keep it at that. Just select mesh, then set that to all is resumable. You can set it to modular and do one at a time, or you can set it to replay and have a look at it in real time. However, most of the time just baking it in one go is good enough for me. So now you can see that it has gone back to just a box, so set it back to wire like that. Okay, so now if we go over to scripting and then we go down here, we click the first cube and we go to the frame for the first cube, which will be 202. Go to fluid, go to flow, liquid, then inflow, and then press I whilst hovering over use flow. Then that will be on this frame here. Then if you press left arrow whilst over here, left arrow, take us to frame 201, uncheck use flow, press I. Then press right arrow twice, take us to frame 203, left click, and then press I. So now, when it gets to the frame where we place the water, for just that frame, this entire cube will add water. Now, if we used geometry, it would add all this water when the fluid domain starts simulating and not when we place down the bucket. This is one of the key points for if you're placing down a bucket. And if you did not uncheck use flow on the next frame like this, then it'd place down more water than just one cube, which in certain cases is good. However, for this, we do not want that. So now do the rest for the other cubes. So go to the next cube, go to the next frame, so 357, fluid, flow, liquid, inflow, press I, press left arrow, left click, press I, press right arrow twice, left click, press I. And then do that for all the other cubes. Okay, once you've done that, go back over to layout, left click on the train, go to the physics tabs, fluid, and then effector. You do not need to change any of these settings. And then do the same for both the doors. So fluid, effector, then doors 2, fluid, effector. Okay, so now if you go over to your domain, what you can do is scroll down to cache, and then set the frame. So set the frame to start to this frame here in scripting, so 202, 202. Then set the frame end to the end here, so 1286. And now if we set this to replay, uncheck mesh, then replay, and then we just go to the start of the frame that we want to start simulating and press space. Now this will lag quite a bit because it has to do all the fluid simulations, but you'll see some dots appearing where you place the first bucket. This is the actual fluid simulation itself. So if you just press spacebar again, you can then move the camera about. Then if we just do that, then press space, you can see these dots are how the fluid will move. So just make sure it is working. So for us it is. Then just press space, shift left arrow. Then you can scroll back down to the cache, set it back to all. Make sure to check mesh, and that should be pretty much everything you need. If you want viscosity, then you can either use viscosity or diffusion. Diffusion is useful for simulating proper water. However, for this simple tutorial, we will not be using that. However, for this tutorial, we will not be using that. That might be in a future tutorial if you need it, want it. Okay, so just click bake all, and then just wait for this to finish baking. Until then, the entire screen will just freeze up, but that is normal. See you when it's finished. Okay, so once your fluid simulation is baked, what you want to do is go back to here, set display to solid, then go to when your frame started. So for mine it was about 202. So let's just go along to 202 using the arrow keys. And you see now it has started. So now we're going to sort out all the render visibility stuff. So we don't want any of this. The only thing we want to show is the fluid domain. So we just click drag all of those so the domain doesn't show. And we don't want the domain to show when it's like this, otherwise we won't be able to see anything. So what we have to do is we have to keyframe when we can see it. So if you go over here to this yellow tab, go under visibility, and then go to the first frame where it shows not a massive cube, press I, where it says renders, then press left arrow, so it is like a massive cube, left click, and then press I. And now, if we play it from here, we should see the simulation. Now what you might also want to do is right click and shade smooth. We'll get to the actual textures in a second. So let's just watch this video, watch this simulation through. So far it looks okay. Oh, then there's the other bit of water. We'll give it the textures in a minute. So we can see it there. And then let's work, where's the doors? 1163. Okay, let's go back to the layout. Let's go to that frame. So it's about here. We can watch as the doors open to see if it flows out as it should. Yes, it does. There we go. And it flows everywhere. Then we get to the final frame. If we just double check through the camera. So yeah, then we have that all lined up. Okay, so one thing I did forget to add to this flow simulation is the fact that the camera has a collision. So what I'm quickly going to do is free the mesh. So right down here, I'll re-simulate this at just 64 frames, but what you want to do is just hide it, add in a cylinder, then under here, this button here, object constraint, copy location of the camera. Then if you press tab, GZ, hold down control, and it should be just on the floor like that. Now you might want to take it down exactly to the floor, so just hold down shift and control. There we go. And now what you want to do is just scale shift Z until it looks about right, and I normally go for about that. Then if you just hide it from render, add in fluid and then effector, like that. Then if we go back to the domain, which I have hidden, we then just re-simulate this. I'll do this at a lower resolution just so it doesn't take as long. This should finish up in no time now. Okay, so now that's simulated, let's just see how it works. Okay, so as you can see, when the camera moves back and forth like here, you see how the water moves out the way. Now when we jump around here, you see how there's like a trail and it forms ripples. That's from it pushing it out the way, and then it all flows out the front. Do get a little bit of leakage here where the player pushes it through the door. However, you shouldn't be able to see that from the actual camera itself, so it should all look fine. So, okay, so let's just jump to a random frame like this one. Hop over to the shading tab. Click this little button up here, press 0 to hop into the camera. And what we're going to do is, for this, we are going to use eevee. So enable ambient occlusion, screen space reflections, and if you want water, screen space refraction. However, we're not going to, so we don't need to do that. Actually, you don't even need to enable that because that can cause some issues. So now what you want to do, add in a texture. So what's a little tip for lighting, what I like to do is I like to add a sun. So press shift A, then left click. So then press dot on the keyboard, rotate it around one axis like that, make sure it's on one, then shift D, right click, alt R, which will get rid of the rotation, which it doesn't really. You just press highlight to go to the orange tab, set to 0, then set that to 0.4, then shift D, RX, then take both of these, Shift D, R, Z, Shift, no Shift, and then just RY. So you end up with a lighting setup like this. And what this does is this adds a, so just press the dot. It adds main light coming from this direction. Then it also adds just ambient lighting like there is in normal Minecraft. Okay, so now let's do the textures. So just click on there. For this, we're just going to do a very simple texture, so like a nice blue. Just going to lower the roughness and the specular a bit. Then make that like maybe a lighter blue. Now if you want it to be water, what we have to do is just enable transmission, scroll down here and select screen space reflection, and then alpha blend. And obviously enable screen space refraction. What this will do is this will actually work like water somewhat, but we don't want to do that, so disable that, set that to opaque, and then disable that. You might want to raise the roughness just a little bit like that. And now we have very basic water. What you can do as well is Shift A, add in an image texture, then Control T if you have Node Wrangler enabled, and set this to generated. Let me just check, is it generated or is it object? I think it might, yeah, I think it is generated. It's download, so just go to Google and search up Minecraft water, just go to images, and then Minecraft water texture. Just find a texture image, texture image. Just use this one, and then just do open image, new tab. Or save image as. Save as a PNG, then open, navigate to there, open it up, and now then now if you look over in here and I open that one up, just this, then if we set this, if we open that up here, you see it's just normal water. What we can do is, I think it might actually be object, or is it normal? No, it's not normal, but this does give a nice effect. So I'll probably render out of something like that. It's not UV because it doesn't have any UV. Yeah, I think it is generated. Then set it to the closest. And then just scale it down by like 25. 30 even. And then that's like Minecraft water. See, there you go. Now if we go back a few frames as well, then the actual location of the texture itself shouldn't change. Let me just up the roughness, or plug it into the actual BSDF. And now we increase the roughness, lower the specular. So the roughness is, well, how shiny it is, the roughness. Then the specular is like the highlights, the reflection of the actual lights themselves. So if we just set it to that, and then over here, just make sure you've got all your settings correct. Then go to your output file. Then you can click this button here. Or if this picture, sorry if this sort of gotten a little bit worse. Like it took a lot to do that first render. So just find your file. So click there. Then find where you're saving it to. Just call it like render 1. Add an underscore on the end if you have a number at the end. Set this to FFmpeg. click this here, click that, make sure that's set to that. And then as long as you have this in your compositing nodes, it should be good. So if I just do a quick render, we can see how this looks. And I'd say this looks okay. Now the only problems with rendering an eevee is you get no shadows. So if you want to have shadows, what you can do is switch this over to cycles, change it over to GPU, of course, because that's better. But adaptive sampling, I'm just going to set this to super like that, and then just add super image denoiser. You don't need to do any of that. Make sure under film you have it set to transparent. And then what you want to do is find your terrain, enable rendering of it, go down to this orange tab here, set the visibility to the shadow catcher, like that. Now you see how there is a shadow there. What this will do is this will render the shadows of the liquid onto the actual terrain. And then now if we render this out, what it will do is it will take a while to render, because it's like, this is like Bedrock RTX kind of stuff, shaders kind of stuff. But once it renders out, we then have a shadow here. And then what I've got here is a super image denoiser. What this does is it just basically gets rid of all this noise, like all these dots. You see how this doesn't look that good? And now once this finishes compositing, see how it's all smoothed out? That's what super image denoiser does. And then the shadow catcher adds like these shadows here. Like you can see some shadows like there. And although you don't get that many, like here's a few more down here, like down here. Although you don't have many shadows, it does help improve the actual image quality, because you even get shadows of this as well on it, like over here. But if you want to just render it fast, set it to eevee, make sure to Control X or just X, drag that back across to make it work properly, then just render F12 to just do a quick render, by the way. So yeah, if you switch back over to eevee, make sure to delete super image denoiser if you do have it, and then obviously hide the terrain from rendering. Then press F12 like that. Now it's rendered out. And yeah, what you can do is if you press Control F12, it will render out the full video. So now that's all for this tutorial. I believe I included how to install Blender, or at least where to get it from, replay, same for replay mods, same for fabric, same for mineways, fluid simulation basics, how to get the camera to interact, other ways you can do it. So with cycles, view notes, make sure you have these settings. They might change sometimes, but I find that these always work for me. Make sure to export, open it as a .exr from replay mode so you can have the depth information, unless I will be coming out with a video soon showing how you don't have to do that if you're using cycles to save on storage space. But if you are unable to use cycles, or it will take too long, then just use this technique with OpenEXR. And I believe that's everything. If you want to know how I make the gold texture, I have an add-on called Quick Metal Materials. I just change it to gold like that. Okay, so if you want to render this out in cycles for transparent water, which is more realistic to, well, real life, then what you will need is a HDRI, which is like a 3D or 360 degree photo of the environment with the lighting. So to do that, what you want to do is stand in the very center, or as close enough to the center of your build, slash wherever you've got the water. Then look certain direction and just start and stop the replay recording as fast as you can. Although as long as you stay in this menu, it will only be 1 frame long. Okay, so now pop over into the recording, then press B, just to hide the player. What you want to do, stand right in the middle, press T, add position, add time, move along just a tiny bit, like that much, and then add time and add position. So now it will render out like just 1 frame. Then click the render button, set the video frame rate to as low as possible, set the rendering to stereoscopic, I believe, no, equirectangular, and then you can render this out as PNG if you want. I'm going to render out as OpenEXR, and then just call it HDRI. Then you can uncheck both of those, make sure that you have all these selected, and then just render. Now this will just render out very few frames. Now hop back over into Blender. Okay, so once you're in Blender, go over to the shading tab. Just toggle full screen. So go over to the shading tab, then down here where it says object, change that over to world, click on background and press Ctrl T. Then open up your HDRI, just use any of them. And now if we go to the film and uncheck transparent, we will see the world. However, as you can see, it looks funny, so that's because the color space is set to linear, not sRGB. And also the rotation will be off by around 90 or 270 degrees. So in this case, it's 270 or negative 90. Oh wait, no, it was 90. So over here under mapping, just change the Z rotation to something like 90. And you can change the location, but all that really does is just distort the image a bit. So it doesn't really work too well. So just leave those values to 0. So now we have more realistic lighting for the Minecraft world. Okay, so to set up a realistic scene in Cycles, first you want to switch over to Cycles and set it to GPU compute, and then make sure your terrain under this little yellow square and visibility is set to a shadow catcher, which means that it, well, catches a shadow. And if you are doing it this way, using Cycles, you do not need these nodes. You just need, you can render it as an MP4 sequence and just do an alpha over node, which I will do right now. Okay, so if you're going to use Cycles, what you can do is you can delete those, take the image to image, and then add input, movie clip. Just open up the clip, if I can find it. There we go. And then just put that into image. And then all you need to do is make sure that you have under film, transparent, then transparent glass. And then what you need now, we're going to do the water texture. So I have a add-on called Super Image Denoiser. So I'm just going to add that in, and what this allows me to do is set my render samples down to a number like 32, then over in compositing, I have this node here, and what this does is this takes the noisy image from the render which is what we see here, and then makes it, well, not as noisy like this one here. To get that, you can just go online on Google and just search Super Image Denoiser Blender, and then just install the add-on as you normally would. Okay, so for the water texture, what we are going to do is we are going to move that up there. It's a mix shader and take a volume scatter and plug that into the bottom, and then set this to a value like 0.3. Now we set this to a very, very light blue and bump this transmission all the way up. So now this is slightly transparent. If I quickly just do that. Okay, so you also want to put the roughness down to like 0. So now you can see that. Then what you want to do is on this, make it like a very light blue, like that. Put the density about 2.3, something like that. And now this adds like a little bit of, well, just like color to it. Okay, so now if we render this out, this will be quite good water. However, it's not going to be the best, so just tweak these values and you can get it to look a lot better. So if we just go to the camera, here it is. Then we're just going to render out. And as you can see, you see that this is slightly blurry, or not blurry, but very pixelated, noisy. And now it's not. So there's the more realistic water. Now this is quite dark water and it's got very blue tinge to it, but you can easily change all that just by changing like the density here, this color, this. So for example, we can set that to 0, or we can set that all the way to 1, which probably isn't a good idea. Since the higher number there, the darker this is going to be. So you probably want that around, probably a number about that. If you don't like how it looks, you can also instead use an add shader. So we just delete that a minute. We have Control X or just normal X. To get out of this menu, you press Shift A, by the way, just a reminder. And this gives this kind of look. However, I find that sometimes that's a little bit too dark. And Blender just crashed. Okay, I've got it back up now. Don't forget to save regularly, because that now helps, because I press Control S a lot, which is the save button. So if we take a mix shader, which is there, plug that back in, switch over to that. And then what we can do over here is, if we want it a little bit lighter, change this up, make that a bit lighter. Oh yeah, if you hold down Shift and then click, you can move it slower, whereas if you just left click, it moves a lot faster. And just Control Z to undo that. Okay, and that's all for rendering in cycles, I think. So yeah, if you're the best rendering in cycles is better if you have low storage on your computer, because you only need an MP4 file, which does not take up a couple hundred gigs. However, rendering in eevee is better if you have a long render and you want to get it done quite fast, and it doesn't really matter how it looks. Because with eevee, you can kind of use this texture, but it still works, but it gives a very funny look to it. So this works much better in cycles because it looks, well, actually like water.